Great.
Hello and welcome to the 8th Annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Leah Langby with the IFLS Library System and I'm moderating the Adult Services track today. Assisting me is Joy Schwartz with the Winnifox Library System. We're very glad to have you all here. And our presenter, we're also glad to have here for this session is Adriana McClear with the Appleton Public Library. And she'll be discussing the community partnerships framework that they're using in Appleton to engage with the community. Adriana, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Okay. So a big thank you to Jamie Machik and all the conference organizers. I also want to thank you, Leah, for the invitation to speak today about what we do at Appleton and the community engagement model that we developed here. Let's see. So I'll share a little background on who I am. I stumbled into librarianship through an AmeriCorps experience in Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm originally from Wisconsin and moved to the Southwest Desert to work in a neighborhood center called the Stardust House. And I moved in the summer. And when I first arrived, my new supervisor asked me, would you like to get the garden up and running or our library? And I almost burst out laughing, just imagining myself as a Wisconsin girl trying to survive in the summer heat in the desert garden for that next full year. So with that, I chose the library. And I just was hooked by librarianship, by the spark that you see when someone finds exactly what they need in their library. So whether it's a book or, you know, this comfy spot to sit in and curl up in, or that warm smile, or they find this new idea, right? And in 2007, I earned my master's in library science from the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I began working in public libraries at Pima County Public Library. And it was a system of 21 locations throughout the county. I worked in adult services and reference at the main downtown library, and then moved on to oversee youth services at a small neighborhood branch. And within my program, I was inspired by this idea of influencing the next generation of librarians. And I thought that my path in doing that would be through academia. And I pursued my PhD in information studies through the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And while I was in my PhD program, I stumbled into something beautiful in finding the perfect fit of a position at the Appleton Public Library. So in 2015, I started in my role as Community Partnership Supervisor here at Appleton, been here since. I love my job and I'm continually energized by the work that we do and fulfilled by the connections we have with our community. I work with amazing, talented, and passionate colleagues throughout my library. And just to give you some detail on my department, we are comprised of one part-time clerk, one part-time and one full-time library assistant, and 4 full-time librarians focused on local history and genealogy, adult services and engagement, and teen services and engagement. So our children's department is a whole other section within our building. And so this is all to tell you the context that my library career was kind of born in. It was developed out of this engaged neighborhood center, the Stardust House. And that center was led by a grassroots community organizer director. And I had the opportunity to attend an extended workshop with the Asset-Based Community Development Institute as a new, fresh librarian. So I really built my career on this foundation of an asset-based, collaborative, community-centered approach to librarianship. So in our time together today, we will discuss what community engagement is. We will explore examples of what prioritizing community looks like, review the Appleton Public Library's Community Partnerships Framework, and refer to several community engagement strategies, things that you can take away today. So I've attended lots of those here's what we did and how we did it really well sessions, and I know it can sometimes be frustrating if your library is not structured the same as another's or doesn't have the funding like another's. You feel stretched. So I hope that this is some inspiration for you to collect and develop your own tools that will help you be strategic and intentional in your community engagement. So let's get started. Within our library and information profession, the American Library Association defines community engagement as, quote, the process of working collaboratively with community members, be they library customers, residents, faculty, students, or partner organizations, to address issues for the betterment of the community. They say, as champions of lifelong learning, libraries are a place to quench curiosity, access technology, and explore new ideas, hobbies, and career. Increasingly, libraries also offer patrons a welcoming space to meet their neighbors to discuss and resolve important issues. So we've seen ALA working closely with the Harwood Institute for Public Innovation to really boost community engagement in libraries. And Harwood refers to the turning outward approach as a process that helps you take steps to better understand communities, to change processes and thinking to make conversations more community focused, being proactive in community issues, and putting community aspirations first. So while this is fresh in our minds after seeing, a chunk of years dedicated to Harwood, we do have a longstanding history of community engagement in libraries, even if it hasn't been the mainstream practice. So while some library history chronicles the trends of libraries' lack of connection with communities, where in general our practice was to meet the information needs of librarians, assuming our communities were just like us. Once you start digging a little deeper, you start to find those gems of inspiration for what we do today. So those librarians who were conducting community assessments and engaging with their communities. As early as the 1800s, Mary Cutler Fairchild was writing and sharing her belief and her practice that it was important to engage with communities to inform library service. Now, the library I work at today, Appleton Public Library, has a history of community connections that has paved the way for our work today. So much of our historical records document the services that were informed by community needs. Like as early as 1904, we provided Sunday hours for folks who were working during the week and were too busy to visit the library then. We helped prepare bibliographies for local clubs upon request. And during World War I, we provided meeting space for war effort groups, including the Committee on War Services. So today we see more proactive engagement beyond just our services and these transactions, and we have more transformative potential for our community. We see across the nation a deeper engagement with embedded librarians, whole person librarianship, social justice initiatives, and creative collaborations across the nation. So we've broadened our professional toolkit and we have access to resources and training from these different research and practice institutes from fields of community organizing, racial equity, health and human services, just to name a few. So I mentioned Harwood Institute is being widely applied in our libraries, helping staff turn outward. Libraries Transforming Communities is also another new initiative working to strengthen libraries' roles as community leaders and change agents using the Harwood approach to community engagement. So many tools that are useful, and even with access and even application to those tools, we still struggle. This is not formulaic work. It's not an exact science. So we can't do A plus B equals community engagement and it will be successful. We do have to be intentional in prioritizing community within our libraries. So say community engagement is a priority for your library. How are you communicating that internally and externally? So from my experience with Appleton Public, I've learned that the past 10 years here have brought numerous internal changes that prioritize community and community engagement. So our library leadership made a structural department change and converted our reference and information to public services and community partnerships. And public services leads the core functions of the library. They oversee circulation and reference services, and they ensure that patrons have an excellent experience in-house. Community partnerships, or CP, was designed to turn outward. So we ensure that information is flowing between the library and the community. And we're connecting and understanding the pulse of the community to be a part of what happens inside our walls, informing our collection, our curation of program offerings, and our library services. And we're also engaged in what's happening outside of our walls. So the CP staff were encouraged to spend time in the community, and that might look like attending different events or open houses for new businesses or new organizations or agencies that are opening, listening to annual reports from different agencies or the Chamber of Commerce, meeting with potential or actual partners, and supported in efforts to develop organic, authentic relationships with community members. So another internal effort is that in 2014, our library hired 2 outreach coordinators specifically focused on engaging the Latinx and Hmong communities to address disparities in academic achievement for youth. So our Hispanic outreach coordinator and Hmong outreach coordinator were developing an initiative. They were involved in developing the initiative called Appleton Ready to Read. And the coordinators used a relationship-focused approach to conduct home visits, host families for library tours, and engage families in programming around early literacy. Another change we've made is in our hiring processes to focus on community engagement. We have renamed some of our positions. So our adult services librarian is now the adult services and engagement librarian. And same for our teen services and engagement librarian. Our interview questions specifically address community engagement, and our job descriptions list expectations that our staff stretch beyond their position for a broader community engagement. So when we hire, we're looking for people who are comfortable working in this ambiguous, ever-changing, organic environment of community engagement. So those are some of our internal approaches to prioritizing community. And then the question is, how do we communicate this priority externally? Community engagement is an explicit part of our mission, vision, and value statements. So on the screen is an image of our mission, vision, and values. Our mission statement is learn, know, gather, grow, your center of community life. And one of our organizational values is community. The library is essential to every person and organization achieving their goals. And what you don't see on the screen is a list of our strategic pillars. So that includes the following. We are a collaborative environment. We connect with partners to share knowledge and information. We are engaged and connected. We focus on making a difference in people's lives. And we cultivate enriched experiences. So we provide experiences that are timely, inclusive, and aligned with community interests. So APL has worked strategically to provide structural support for staff engagement with the community. So as you look at your library and think about where you are with those questions, how you're communicating internally and externally your priority of community, think about whether this is aspirational for you, or not, or how you'd like to do that, and think about how you'll create your own tools for community engagement. As our library has made this structural change and really publicly shared our focus, we've increased our community engagement and partnerships in that outward-facing approach. And we found that we have to be increasingly careful and intentional in how we're spending our time and engaging with the community. So when I began at APL 5 years ago, the staff were already doing amazing work in the community. They were participating in local events, sitting on boards and committees. They were partnering with other agencies, and they had strong relationships already. And as they continued to strengthen the library's reputation and their individual reputations in the community, more and more opportunities kept rolling in. So this is where the seeds of community engagement start to blossom in people reaching out, connecting with us, asking us to be a part of different initiatives, and seeking to spend time with our staff. And so as we were fielding more and more requests and trying to say yes to everyone, we took a moment to reflect. And we asked ourselves, are our partners empowered and equipped to help themselves in some cases? So we saw that people assumed they had to partner with us in order to access a number of our resources. So do they know that they can reserve our meeting rooms online, and they have access to posting their events in our online calendar without being a partner necessarily in making that happen? So in 2016, we set out to create a tool that would help us clarify our identity and our responsibilities as a department. And it would also help us improve our communication as these requests came in. So we realized, one, we needed to conduct better reference interviews with partners to understand what they actually needed and wanted, and didn't jump to partnership immediately, either on our part, or if they said partnership, we didn't automatically jump there. And then two, that there were opportunities to empower and equip our community members and our partners to use our library resources through more support and service than partnership. So I started the process in creating a tool by using an idea mapping exercise to visually organize what we do in our partnerships and in our department. So I thought of various terms that we might use to categorize partnerships to begin, and use tons and tons of Post-it notes to list examples of the work that CP staff were already doing. And I worked with CP staff to continue building a visual, and started to see two distinct categories emerge in this exercise. So the image you see on the screen is just an example of some of the terms, not what our actual Post-it sheets look like in this idea mapping process. So the two categories that emerged were APL Strategic Efforts and responding to community needs and requests. So the first category on the left, strategic efforts, were things that we planned for, and we offered with specific intention to advance our city goals or our library strategic goals. And then there were opportunities that arose spontaneously, and our responses to community needs and requests, while they do advance our strategic goals at times, they're not as predictable or planned as the other items. So not everything we did fit and continue to do fits neatly into one box or another. And some of the categories had finer distinctions in their subcategories. So for instance, the way we present programs can vary significantly, and I'll show you examples of that. So this kind of two blocks wasn't enough to function as a tool for us. We wanted to include some nuance and subcategories within this. And from that, the community partnerships framework was born. So this is an example of what the full framework looks like. We use this as a training tool for new CP staff and volunteers. We use this as a communication tool for articulating what our department does. and for broadly planning and evaluating our efforts. So next, I'll share a sampling of the things we do in the library and in the community within this framework. And you'll likely recognize examples of things you're doing in your libraries also, and maybe you call them the same or different things. Just to give you, I want to give you a more detailed look at how we organize this. So programs. As I mentioned, all of our programs are not the same. Each a different type requires different levels of staff time and energy and resources. So some programs are organized and presented by APL staff, like many of our teen programs. These are opportunities for our staff to develop relationships with teens and gain insights that inform our services and our future programming. Other programs are organized and presented by volunteers. So there's a picture here of Sherry. She is one of our volunteers who developed an engaging creative writing program. And the program serves the community well, and she gains this meaningful experience as a volunteer with us. And other programs are organized by staff, but presented by contracted presenters. For example, listed here is Find Your Ancestors. We invite experts to share high quality genealogy and local history research programs for our community. Our services are a separate category that are informed by our community connections, sometimes informed by our programs and conversations we have in programs with people. We respond to requests for obituary searches. We create book lists for people, provide research support and online resource instruction. And listed here are our one-on-one sessions for assistance with online resources, job skill development, local history research. And sometimes we see that a program has attendees that need more one-on-one support. So like I mentioned, some of our services are born out of program offerings. Okay, the third category is community engagement. So this one includes examples of things that live in multiple categories. So doesn't everything we do have an element of community engagement? Yes, it does. Community engagement takes place in our partnerships, in our programming, planning, and in our services. So even though it's a large part of what we do, we thought it deserved its own space and a clear articulation of what this entails to make sure that this is actively pursued, for one, and second, we wanted to highlight this significant area of community partnerships work. So a portion of our time is spent here, and we want to be able to explain why we do what we do. So we're intentional about engaging our community through community support, relationship building, and one-on-one conversations. I mentioned our staff sits on committees in the community and supports local organizations like the Appleton Historical Society. We attend annual report presentations, and we invite organizations in for library staff training on a regular basis. And we're intentional in our efforts to form relationships and really listen to inform our services, to inform our collection, our space, and our programs. So we meet one-on-one with individuals, and we use this asset-based approach of listening to what people care about, what they're concerned with, and what gifts and talents they have to share with this world. We have a number of volunteers that have joined our staff here, volunteering here because of one-on-one conversations where we've learned that they have a passion, they have an interest. We've also gained contracted presenters through that same one-on-one listening conversation. Our outreach is where we take the library into the community with two intentions. So making services available to our non-users or underrepresented populations, and giving our resources some visibility and promotion. Our outreach efforts are often coordinated as a community support, where we're adding value to an event rather than just benefiting ourselves. Certainly there are other opportunities that we pursue to benefit ourselves by getting out there and providing that service and promotion. So these 4 ways in that top left corner, program, services, community engagement, and outreach, are the ways we strategically advance City of Appleton and Appleton Public Library goals. And the next category, responding to community needs and requests, is through partnerships and support. So first, partnerships are broken down further into types of co-sponsorships, where we, 1, are actively contributing to the design of a program with another group, and 2, where we're actively contributing to a program that is already designed. So for example, we might do something that adds value to something that's already pre-designed or developed. And the last partnership type is a collaboration. So this is a larger, many times ongoing community effort or initiative that we get involved with. And that, oh, excuse me. There we go. So next, our support is more passive than our partnerships. So we coordinate library resources like our library space for other agencies that are providing a service for our patrons. So one example is Feeding America. They have a table in our front lobby and they connect people with food share benefits and food resources. And when people walk in, they see the service and they may take advantage of it. We also connect our patrons with other resources and individuals based on our experiences with partners. So we see people and agencies as a part of our collection. So as our staff becomes more familiar with local resources like people and agencies and organizations, they're able to connect patrons with who they need or what they need when they need it. Finally, we serve as a resource by providing our traditional library service. So we found ways to equip our community partners to use our resources to lead their own programs. Foxtrot Trail is an example of an initiative in the community where one of our local history librarian provided research support and connected the initiative with a number of our resources where they could continue searching and finding the information they need for their project. So the Community Partnerships Framework was developed, as I mentioned, by reviewing the work we were already doing. And there's not a hierarchy to these categories, so we can cut up, slice and dice this framework to look specifically at one area. We've used it within our meetings to focus attention to one area over another. And if we wanted to evaluate our workload, for example, around program offerings, we could zone into the purple section of programs for review. So this tool helps us look broadly to make sure that we're fulfilling our section objectives and that we're maximizing our resources of funding, space, time, and energy and creativity. This framework has helped our staff to specifically define what we do and articulate that the purpose of our efforts for other staff, for our library board, and for our community partners. So if you would design your own framework, it may look completely different depending on what you do in your library. And if you developed a framework, for example, what are additional strategies for building relationships, prioritizing initiatives and opportunities, and interacting effectively with community? The Multnomah County Office of Diversity and Equity created an equity and empowerment lens with a racial justice focus that is used as a quality improvement tool to enhance their planning, their decision making, and their resource allocation that would lead to more racially equitable policies and programs. So this is a next step tool to strengthen the quality of your engagement efforts of relationship building, decision making, and collaborating. And if you can incorporate a racial equity lens into your community engagement, you are improving life outcomes for all groups in your community. So this equity and empowerment lens includes a 5 Ps workshop or worksheet, and it's focused on purpose, people, place, process, and power. So a deep dive into this tool could be a whole separate presentation. I want to call attention to this tool and this initiative as a resource for you. And I'll highlight 3 of the Ps to give some examples of what we do here and what we've encountered in the community, and encourage you to check out the full toolkit that Multnomah County has put available on their website. So this lens is really focused on doing less harm and supporting actions that heal and transform our communities. So this nicely aligns with our ALA community engagement concept, right? Of working collaboratively with our residents to address issues for the betterment of the community. So I placed community engagement efforts at the center of the 5 Ps, and the notes that I'll share with you through the rest of my presentation are a mix of actual practice and aspirational practices here at APL. So things we're actually doing and things that we can improve on in opportunity areas, but we've come across and we know are there ready to be enhanced. So if you plan to advance community engagement in your library and your community, here are some things to consider. The first step to taking action is to identify your purpose. So articulate what you're envisioning. What is your purpose as an individual and on behalf of your institution? Identify what might get in the way of maintaining that purpose and what you need to advance that purpose. Is there data or evidence that guides the direction of this effort? So perhaps you want to move the needle on a specific disparity in your community. In Appleton in 2016, we learned from a local study on the quality of life in the Fox cities that housing insecurity was a growing community issue. And local leaders gathered and they named housing insecurity as one of the top issues to focus on. So we had seen other groups taking action around this topic and saw that we were positioned to coordinate some civic dialogue and engagement around this issue. And we called together representatives from area shelters, the school district, Goodwill, and Habitat for Humanity to choose a book title that would increase public awareness of this issue and foster dialogue and action on this issue. So we ended up having 2 community reads, one in Appleton and one across the Fox cities in 2016 and 2019, where we were engaging community members around the book, Matthew Desmond's Evicted book, and engaging in deeper conversations and offering opportunities for people to take action and get engaged in the community. We also had another local effort called Imagine Fox Cities that looked at community and individual well-being through a survey and community dialogue and discussions. So while the library has a history of offering civic engagement opportunities, we want to highlight the themes that were identified by Imagine Fox Cities, and we want to make our efforts more targeted, more relevant to the community's needs and interests, and also visible so that people see what we're doing in connection with this local initiative. Are you focused on the community engagement process more than direct impact of your effort? So perhaps your approach and your process will advance future initiatives as opposed to immediately addressing a specific community issue. So that might be looking at ways to use your community engagement strategies to enhance your existing processes of planning and implementing programs and outreach. So the next P is really important, is the focus on people. So describe the groups that will be most affected by and concerned with your effort. As you're listening And as you're listing and describing groups who would be most affected or concerned with your efforts, consider who might be partners in your community engagement efforts. So this is really the obvious part, right? That you should be partnering with organizations, groups, individuals, but it's not simple. So that's an area that requires significant care and effort. We know that partnerships are not formulaic. This is, as I mentioned, not about you adding what you bring to the table to what another entity brings to the table and automatically equaling success. You know that partnerships are not transactions. So ideally, they don't begin when you need something or when you have a big idea. This isn't about calling a group to the table and taking what you need and then going your separate ways after a program. So our partnerships should be rooted in relationships, and lasting relationships should be rooted in trust. So if you're representing an institution, whether that's the city, county, or your specific library that has historically marginalized people of color, people experiencing poverty, or LGBT folks, for example, it may take a long time to gain trust in those communities. So you'll want to acknowledge and remember that you and your institution are not entitled to someone's trust. So there's going to be a requirement for effort putting forth resources of time, staff, space, funding, and continuing to show up and supporting the community. Trust is not a commodity that ultimately you can possess. So if you begin earning trust with communities and individuals, you'll still want to maintain the relationships through active connection and engagement. It's not something that is dynamic. It is something that is dynamic. So it's living and breathing and requires maintenance. You know, all relationships require maintenance. So ideally, this begins before you're ready to plan a partner program. And in a time when institutions are trying to do more with less, your relationships in the community can be your greatest resource. I mentioned a community organizing framework called Asset-Based Community Development, or ABCD. And that framework is based on a notion that every community already has what it needs to flourish. So we are strengthened by relationship, collaboration, and connection. So within the spirit of ABCD, as you look to connect with formal leaders and established agencies, think also about the employment leaders, the people that others go to with their questions and ideas, the busy bees of the neighborhoods, and the parents who are speaking out for the group in PTA, for example. Think also about the amazing people who may be interested in contributing, but don't necessarily have the connections or networks yet. So there are plenty of people out there who are looking for ways to activate their leadership, and an opportunity in collaboration with the library can be the perfect space to do that. And when you're reaching out to folks, don't plan to bring your agenda or your elevator speech in that first interaction. You'll want to prepare to listen and learn. So ABCD provides resources around one-on-one learning conversations. So you might request a time to meet with someone, and you don't have to call it that. You can just say, let's get together. I'd love to learn more about you. And your goal is to understand what someone else cares about. Understand what their dreams are for the future, understand what their fears are, what they're concerned with, and then what they have to offer this world. So what are their skills, their talents, their passion, where are they committing their time? And you know, naturally in conversation, you'll likely share information about yourself, but that initial meeting shouldn't be scheduled to alone advance your agenda, to only share what your library has to offer. That'll come up in time as you continue maintaining that relationship and building that trust with that person. So another question, What are the benefits and burdens that communities experience with the efforts? So in your community engagement, in your program planning, are there benefits that people gain? And are those benefits assumed, or are they rooted in actual input or feedback? And what about the burdens? How do you know that those burdens exist? And are you actively seeking input and feedback? You can also ask, how does the effort build capacity within populations most affected by disparities in your community? So this is the healing and transforming element of community engagement through that equity and empowerment lens. And finally, what is meaningful, engaging, and manageable for your library staff and volunteers? So as we developed new job descriptions for our department, we tried to leave enough flexibility in the positions that allowed new staff to, one, contribute their unique skills and talent to the position, and two, co-create with the community. So one example is one of our adult services and engagement librarians is a small business owner and an entrepreneur. And so she has an understanding of a unique experience and a community population. And that understanding has informed new programming, new collaborations, and relationships over the past year. So an asset-based approach to management is looking at her experience as a resource and having open discussions about whether that is something she wants to bring to her library work. Community engagement is an organic process that requires time. So when your staff are out of the building, when they're having lunch with people, having coffee, when they're attending events, trust that their time is well spent in their efforts to build relationships that lead to deeper community engagement. You'll want to think about what supports your staff will need to do this work. So what flexibility can you offer in scheduling? Engagement work happens early morning. It happens in the evenings. It happens on the weekends. So if you want your staff to stay with your library long term, keep searching for ways to support them. How can you be a champion for your staff when others are wondering where so-and-so is and why they're never at their desk? So you'll likely have that come up. You know, our work is dynamic, and you might have to be that champion that explains that we specifically hired this person to do dynamic work, and that changes from week to week. Be a guide for your staff as they figure out how to balance the in-house responsibilities with those community efforts. So we still need to do collection development. We still need to report our statistics and write summaries of what we did and communicate internally with our colleagues in the library. So keeping everything manageable is an art. It's alive, it's breathing. It's something that requires attention, guidance, and support continuously. And finally, you'll also need to leave room for the whole second half of the framework that I shared with you, responding to community needs and requests. So as people get to know how amazing you are and how rich the library is with resources and ideas and potential, you'll be invited to more committees and task forces and summit gatherings, and people will want to have lunch with you. So these are the blossoms that come from all of those community engagement seeds that you've planted. So anticipate those opportunities and think about how your involvement in these new efforts can continue to strengthen your community engagement. And you likely won't be able to say yes to all of them. So as you're asking yourself these questions, looking at the 5 Ps or the 3 Ps, you can make that determination of whether that's a place to dedicate your time. The next P is a focus on power. So how are you including or excluding people who are affected by this effort? We received some funding for cultural programming a couple years ago, where a community group thought that our Congolese community members would benefit from us offering a cultural program, a Congolese cultural program. And we wanted to explore this further. And so we don't want to jump to making a plan to offer something without working with the community that would be impacted or affected by the effort. So starting with the questions, who is our Congolese community? Who are they? What are they interested in? What are they concerned with? One of our staff members would attend the World Relief Refugee Resettlement Agency groups on a monthly basis and continue to learn and listen and meet with Congolese community members to get to know them. And we learned that what was of interest was a computer class in Swahili and Kinyarwanda. So rather than starting with that answer of, here's what we want to plan, how can you help us make it happen? Starting with questions allowed us to get to a place where we could offer a program that was of interest and that had meaning for the Congolese community members. And we haven't talked about a cultural celebration in quite a while because as our relationships develop with the Congolese community members, that hasn't come up again and from the community, and it's not something that we would push. What is your decision-making structure? So if you're working in partnership with community members and inviting people to share their input and feedback, how much weight does it hold? And which decisions are made by the group and which are made just by your organization? And is this process transparent? Our staff and our previous artists in residence worked with a group of students to inform an art piece that is now hanging in our teen area. And from the beginning of the program, they were straightforward in explaining that the teen's ideas would be interpreted by the artist and projected through his artistic lens to create the final piece. So their role and his role were clear, and it was a positive experience for everyone. So what does it look like when you're bringing people to the table and asking for input on a new program or initiative? How are you accounting for people's emotional and physical safety and their need to be productive and feel valued? So decision-making should include a diverse representation of your community, whether or not you're planning identity-based programming or experience-based programming. An extra effort should be made to ensure that underrepresented people have the opportunity to contribute. And you have to be thoughtful about your inclusion efforts. So relying on the same people over and over again can lead to an imbalance if you're continually asking them to advance your agenda and you're not intentionally helping to advance theirs. So if your library, like mine, has an organizational value for the library being essential to every person and organization achieving their goals, this is something you can consider in your partnerships. How are you helping others advance their goals? And when you request a one-on-one meeting and someone says yes to that meeting, consider what they are saying no to doing that day. So for example, if an agency is understaffed or struggling financially and they agree to meet with you, they may be foregoing other important work. And this is just a reminder to be respectful of time and to be really thoughtful in what you're asking of others as a follow-up from that meeting. Quick examples are taking care in requests like asking people to send you links to items you can easily search for yourself, asking people to transcribe their personal notes and send them to you or send them to the group. You'll want to keep their interests in mind. And finally, calling people to the table at a late stage in planning a program or initiative can sometimes be fruitless or even damaging to a relationship. This can easily happen if you're just getting to know a particular sector of your community. And so you can be honest and acknowledge that you really wish you'd reach out to them earlier and try to do better the next time. So as we're aware and we're honest and we're acknowledging mistakes if they come up, this is helping us build that trust and strengthen the relationships. And we want to go beyond simply inviting people to a meeting, right? So that requires minimal effort. Extra efforts that we can make to ensure that people are included and have opportunities to contribute go a long way. So if we're going the extra mile, that's welcoming your partners as they walk in the door, and introducing them to longstanding members of a particular group, being a champion for them when they're not in the room. And if they have not had an opportunity to speak in a meeting, asking them, is there anything that you'd like to share? And so all of these efforts are to reduce the barriers to inclusion, such as isolation, selective mentorship, and outright discrimination. So when we bring underrepresented people to the table, is the table equipped to be welcoming and inclusive? And if not, be prepared to address overt discrimination and microaggressions when they occur. So I mentioned to you there are many frameworks, many tools available to you for community engagement. My presentation was rooted in the Appleton Public Library's approach and the Multnomah County Office of Diversity and Equity's Equity and Empowerment lens. So I hope you're inspired to take some action from your position in the library and to strengthen community engagement from where you stand. I have a list of resources here that I mentioned, and I want to invite you to contact me after today with your feedback, with your questions, and your ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was really inspiring and exciting to hear about. I want to remind people that we do have a few more minutes for questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in now. In the meantime, I'm going to ask a question that we have in waiting, which is, can you talk a little bit about how Children's Services is worked into this approach, or if they are, or if they're just kind of, if they're doing this on a parallel path, or how that all works?
Sure. We are separate departments, but we collaborate lots and have kind of big picture discussions. And I mentioned two positions that were born out of this, broader community engagement approach. And I can offer examples of how our Children's Services Department implements, different pieces of the framework. Yeah, I think it's an institutional focus on community engagement, and the tool that we created is more of a specific department kind of functional tool for explanations. So while there are examples, I don't know that the Children's Department is referring to that tool on a regular basis.
Okay. And you don't know if they have their own that they have developed as a...
There's not a separate one, no.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions?
Leah Ann had a question. Are you seeing it there?
I didn't. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, can you give an example of a microaggression at a meeting? Thank you, Joy.
Sure. I'm so glad that you're here. We have been trying to make our committee more diverse for a long time. And, this feeling of this gesture of welcoming is marred by the sense that you are actually a token participant in this meeting. The way that we're talking about marginalized communities, maybe it's not a direct, a comment directed at someone else in the meeting, but if we're talking about our population experiencing poverty in a disparaging way, it's creating a hostile environment and contributes to negative stereotypes about communities that we're serving and working to collaborate with.
Excellent. That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? Now I remember where my question panel is hanging out, and I can I can actually notice. I'm not seeing anything, and we are very close to the end of the session. So thank you so much. This was a great session. As we mentioned before, this session recording and the slides will be posted on the conference website by January 24th, which is Friday. That was our last session for today. We'll begin at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with tracks in library management and in small libraries. So I hope some of you can join us tomorrow. If not, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks
Thank you,
so
Leah.
much.